The stars watched silently as another battle raged between the massive warships of the Galactic Alliance and the Star Empire. Energy beams cut through the darkness of space, while smaller fighter ships darted between the larger vessels like angry insects. It was a familiar sight, one that had played out countless times across hundreds of star systems over the past 3 centuries. On the bridge of the Alliance flagship Guardian, Admiral Turner stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His aged face showed no emotion as he watched yet another exchange of fire between the two forces. The battle had been going on for 6 hours, and they had moved forward only 3 kilometers in space. It was always the same. "Status report," he called out, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who had given the same command thousands of times before. "Enemy shields at 48%, our shields at 52%. The young officer replied from his station. "We've lost 2 cruisers, they've lost 3. Standard battle progression." "Sir." Turner nodded slowly. "Standard battle progression." Everything was standard these days. The Empire would form their ships into a diamond pattern. The Alliance would counter with a sphere formation. Shields would slowly wear down on both sides until one fleet was forced to retreat. The next day, they would do it all again. In the medical bay of the Guardian, doctors treated the wounded with practiced efficiency. They didn't rush anymore. There was no point. Everyone knew exactly how many casualties to expect in a battle of this size. The calculations were so precise that medical supplies were ordered months in advance in exact quantities. Across the battlefield, on the Empire's command ship Eternal, Commander Stone watched the battle with growing frustration. He was younger than most officers of his rank, and sometimes he wondered if there was more to warfare than this endless dance of attrition. But such thoughts were dangerous. The last officer who had suggested a change in tactics had been removed from command for strategic instability. The battle continued as the hours ticked by. Damaged ships on both sides retreated in an almost choreographed manner, replaced by fresh vessels that took up their exact positions in the formation. The debris of destroyed ships floated in the space between the two fleets, adding to the vast field of wreckage that marked this sector of space. In the crew quarters of both fleets, soldiers and officers alike went about their duties with mechanical precision. Some of them came from families that had served in the same positions for generations. Many couldn't remember why the war had started, and few cared anymore. It was simply the way things were. A young Alliance ensign sat in the ship's archive room during his break, reading through historical records. The original cause of the war was listed differently in various documents. Some claimed it was a border dispute, others a religious conflict, and still others pointed to a personal feud between ancient leaders. The truth had been lost to time, buried under centuries of routine combat and standardized reports. As the battle entered its 10th hour, Admiral Turner received the expected message from his shield management officer. "Sir, shield strength dropping below sustainable levels. Recommend standard withdrawal procedure." Turner gave the order, and the Alliance fleet began its precision retreat. The Empire's ships followed at the exact distance their tactical manuals prescribed, firing the expected number of shots. Both sides had lost the predicted number of ships and personnel. The battle was recorded as a minor Empire victory, as the Alliance had retreated first. In the aftermath, maintenance crews from both sides went about their work, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. They carefully avoided each other according to the established protocols, even though they could see their counterparts through their ship windows, doing the exact same work in the exact same way. The stars continued their eternal watch as the two fleets drifted apart. In a few days, they would meet again at another predetermined location. More ships would be destroyed, more lives would be lost, and more reports would be filed. The war would continue as it always had, an endless cycle of calculated destruction and measured response. But unknown to both sides, far away in an unexplored sector of space, a small anomaly was forming. A ripple in the fabric of space-time that would soon bring something neither the Alliance nor the Empire had accounted for in their careful calculations: chaos, innovation, and the unpredictable nature of human warfare. The Alliance scout ship Seeker drifted silently through the outer edges of the neutral zone. Its captain, Tom Reed, stared at the sensor readings with growing confusion. He'd been making this same patrol route for 15 years, but today something was different. The space ahead of them seemed to twist, creating patterns he'd never seen before. "Sir," called out his sensor officer, Mary White, her voice tight with excitement. "The readings are getting stronger. Whatever it is, it's big." She hadn't shown this much emotion in years. None of them had. The predictability of their endless war had slowly drained the wonder from space exploration. The Seeker's engines hummed as they moved closer to the anomaly. Through the main viewport, the crew watched as space itself seemed to fold inward, creating what looked like a massive tunnel of swirling light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "A wormhole," Reed whispered, barely believing his own words. In 3 centuries of war, neither side had discovered anything like this. Their maps of known space had remained unchanged for generations. But now, right in front of them, was something new. The ship's computer worked frantically to analyze the phenomenon. Data scrolled across screens as the crew watched in silence. The wormhole was stable, and initial scans showed it led somewhere far beyond their known galaxy. But what caught everyone's attention were the energy readings coming from the other side. "Captain," White called out again, her fingers dancing across her console. "I'm detecting power signatures unlike anything in our database. They don't match either Alliance or Empire patterns." She paused, double-checking her readings. "Sir, they're stronger than anything we've ever recorded." Reed knew immediately what this could mean. In a war where both sides were evenly matched, any advantage could tip the balance. He opened a secure channel to Alliance Command, knowing this discovery would shake the foundations of their carefully ordered world. The response was immediate. Within hours, a full Alliance battle group arrived at the Seeker's location. Admiral Turner himself stood on the bridge of the Guardian, watching the wormhole with intense interest. For the first time in decades, there was something unpredictable in their war. And despite himself, he felt a long-forgotten spark of curiosity. "Send probe units through," Turner ordered. The crew scrambled to obey, their movements less mechanical than usual. Small, unmanned vessels disappeared into the swirling vortex, transmitting data back to the waiting fleet. The Empire, of course, noticed the unusual Alliance activity. Their spy satellites picked up the increased ship movements, and soon their own fleet arrived at a safe distance. Commander Stone observed the situation through high-powered scanners, his young mind racing with possibilities. Neither fleet made any aggressive moves. The discovery was too important for their usual battle routines. Instead, they watched and waited, gathering data, and trying to understand what this might mean for their endless conflict. The probes sent back strange images. On the other side of the wormhole lay unknown star systems, filled with energy signatures that defied their understanding. There were signs of civilization, but nothing that matched their records of any known race. "Sir," one of Turner's officers reported, "we're detecting movement from the wormhole. Something's coming through." The entire bridge crew held their breath, watching as the swirling portal began to pulse with increasing energy. The Empire ships detected it too. Both fleets moved into defensive positions, but not in their usual formations. For the first time in centuries, they were facing something unknown, and their standard tactics didn't apply. The energy readings from the wormhole spiked suddenly. Space twisted and stretched, and then, in a flash of brilliant light, something emerged. It was a ship, but unlike anything either fleet had ever seen. It was smaller than their capital ships, but moved with an agility that seemed impossible for its size. As both Alliance and Empire forces watched in stunned silence, the strange vessel's external lights flickered to life, revealing markings in an unknown script. Only later would they learn that the word spelled out thunder of dawn, and that this single ship would change everything they thought they knew about warfare. Captain James Walker's head was spinning as the thunder of dawn emerged from what should have been a routine jump drive test. His ship's sensors were going crazy, showing two massive fleets of unknown vessels positioned on either side of them. This definitely wasn't the test range near Mars they'd been aiming for. Status report. He called out, fighting to keep his voice steady. Around him, his crew worked with the quick efficiency that made them one of Earth's best warship crews. Jump drive is offline. First Officer Robert Mason reported, his fingers flying over his console. But all other systems are functioning. Sir, you need to see these readings. Those ships out there, they're huge. The view screen showed vessels that dwarfed the thunder of dawn. They were beautiful in a way, all smooth lines and massive energy weapons, but Walker's trained eye noticed something odd about their formations. They were too perfect, too rigid. Chief Hayes, Walker called to his engineer. What are you seeing? Linda Hayes looked up from her station, her eyes wide with wonder. Sir, their tech is advanced, but it's like they're stuck in a loop. Every ship is using the exact same power settings. There's no variation, no adaptation. The Alliance and Empire fleets watched the strange newcomer with equal parts fear and curiosity. On the Guardian's bridge, Admiral Turner studied the smaller vessel with growing interest. Its design was completely foreign, all sharp angles and exposed weapon ports, like it was built for actual combat rather than the choreographed battles they were used to. Sir, an Alliance officer reported, the unknown vessel is powering up its weapons, but the energy pattern keeps changing. We can't get a lock on their firing solution. On the Empire flagship, Commander Stone was reaching the same conclusion. The strange ship's power signatures shifted constantly, making it impossible to predict its capabilities using their standard tactical programs. The Thunder of Dawn's crew watched as both fleets began moving into attack positions. Walker recognized the signs of combat preparation from years of studying historical battles, but something felt off. Look at their formations, Mason said, pointing at the tactical display. They're moving like it's a parade ground demonstration, not a battle setup. Walker nodded slowly, an idea forming in his mind. Send out an open transmission, he ordered. All frequencies, simple text only. The Alliance and Empire ships froze in their tracks as identical messages appeared on their screens. This is Captain James Walker of the Earth warship Thunder of Dawn. We come from another arm of the galaxy. Our jump drive test went wrong. We mean no harm. The response took several minutes, as both fleets seemed unsure how to handle a situation that wasn't in their tactical manuals. Finally, two messages came back, one from each side, both saying almost the same thing. Identify your allegiance. Are you Alliance or Empire? Walker couldn't help but smile. Send another message, he told his communications officer. Tell them. Neither. We're something new. The next few hours were tense but fascinating. The Thunder of Dawn's crew watched as the two massive fleets attempted to process the existence of a third party. Their rigid formations shifted uncomfortably, and their communication patterns became erratic. Walker used this time to study them. He saw how their weapons were always charged to the same power levels, how their shields never varied in strength. 3 centuries of war had turned them into machines, following the same patterns over and over. Sir, Hayes called out suddenly, they're scanning us. But their scans, they keep using the same frequencies, the same patterns. It's like they don't know how to adapt. Walker understood then. These advanced civilizations had forgotten something humans had learned through countless wars on Earth: the importance of unpredictability, of adaptation, of thinking differently. As the day drew to a close, representatives from both the Alliance and Empire requested to board the Thunder of Dawn. They wanted to understand this ship that defied their tactical predictions, this crew that didn't follow their rules of warfare. Walker agreed, knowing that this meeting would change everything. His small ship, lost in space due to a failed test, was about to show 2 ancient civilizations something they had forgotten long ago. That war wasn't about following patterns, but about innovation, adaptability, and the unpredictable nature of intelligent minds. The meeting room on the Thunder of Dawn fell silent as Walker finished explaining Earth's military history. The Alliance and Empire representatives sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just learned. The very idea of changing tactics during battle, of adapting strategies based on the situation, seemed to deeply disturb them. "But how do you calculate casualty rates beforehand?" asked the Alliance representative, his face showing genuine confusion. "How do you order the correct number of medical supplies?" Walker exchanged looks with Mason before answering. "We don't. We prepare for multiple scenarios and adjust as needed. War isn't predictable where we come from." The Empire officer touched the display screen showing Earth's conflicts through history. "Your people fought differently in each battle. No standard formations. No fixed patterns." The concept seemed to frighten and fascinate him at the same time. Linda Hayes, who had joined the meeting to explain the Thunder of Dawn's technical capabilities, pulled up a simulation of their latest battle drills. The aliens watched in amazement as the human ship performed maneuvers that broke every rule in their tactical manuals. "See how we vary our shield strength," Hayes pointed out. "Strong in one area, lighter in others, changing constantly. It uses more power, but it makes us harder to hit." On the main screen, sensor data showed the massive Alliance and Empire fleets still holding their positions outside. Their ships maintained perfect formation, shields at uniform strength, weapons charged to standard levels. It looked impressive but predictable. "You're telling us," the Alliance representative said slowly, "that your smaller ship could potentially defeat our larger vessels, simply by being unpredictable." Walker nodded. "Size isn't everything. A smaller force using the right tactics at the right time can overcome a larger one. We learned that lesson many times on Earth." The Empire officer stood up suddenly. "This is impossible. Our tactical computers cannot process combat scenarios without fixed patterns. Random actions would crash our entire battle network." Mason smiled slightly. "That's exactly the point. Your computers don't fight your war. They just follow programs. Real combat needs living minds making real-time decisions." As if to prove their point, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. A young crew member rushed into the meeting room. "Captain, we've detected a rogue Empire patrol fleet attacking an Alliance mining colony. They're not following the standard battle protocols." The Empire officer paled. "Impossible. No commander would break formation." But the sensor data didn't lie. A group of Empire ships had broken away from the main fleet, attacking the poorly defended colony with unusual aggression. Walker's mind raced with possibilities. This was a chance to show both sides what human tactical thinking could do. "How many civilian workers in that colony?" he asked. 4,000, the Alliance representative replied automatically. "Standard colony size." "And they'd all die in a standard battle sequence," Walker said grimly. "Well, we're about to show you a non-standard response." He hit the ship's intercom. "All hands to battle stations, but not for standard combat. We're running Rescue Pattern Delta." The Thunder of Dawn's crew jumped into action. The Alliance and Empire representatives watched in amazement as the smaller ship's power readings began fluctuating wildly. Weapons charged to varying levels, shields pulsed in irregular patterns, and the engine output seemed to make no logical sense. "What are you doing?" both aliens asked simultaneously. Walker's eyes were fixed on the tactical display as his crew prepared for battle. "We're going to save that colony, not by following any preset pattern, but by doing what humans do best, adapting to the situation." The representatives watched as the Thunder of Dawn broke away from their fleets, its movements smooth but unpredictable. For the first time in centuries, the Alliance and Empire were about to witness something they had forgotten: the chaos, creativity, and effectiveness of real combat tactics. "You might want to watch carefully," Mason told their guests as the ship accelerated toward the battle. "You're about to see why humans never wrote our tactics into computer programs. Some things can't be reduced to simple patterns. The thunder of dawn cut through space like a knife. Its approach nothing like the measured advances both alien races were used to seeing. The rogue Empire ships noticed the incoming vessel that seemed confused by its erratic flight pattern, unable to predict its trajectory. "Their targeting computers are trying to lock onto us," Hayes reported from her station, a hint of amusement in her voice. "But they keep losing the signal because we're not flying in a straight line." Walker nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The 3 Empire dreadnoughts were arranged in their standard attack formation, focusing their fire on the colony's weakening shields. They hadn't even bothered to change their positions when they spotted the thunder of dawn approaching. "Time to show them something new," Walker said. "Mason, prepare the point defense systems for scatter mode. Hayes, give me random power fluctuations in the shields. Let's confuse their sensors." The Alliance and Empire representatives watched in silence from their observer stations on the bridge. Their expressions showed equal parts horror and fascination as the human ship deliberately broke every rule of space combat they knew. The thunder of dawn's first move shocked everyone watching. Instead of engaging at standard combat range, it dove straight between 2 of the Empire dreadnoughts. The massive ships tried to adjust their fire, but couldn't compensate for the smaller vessel's speed and unpredictable movements. "Targeting their shield generators," Mason called out. "But not to destroy, just disable." His fingers danced across the weapons console, sending precisely calculated bursts of energy that disrupted the enemy ship's shield patterns without causing catastrophic damage. The first dreadnought's shields flickered and died. The Empire crew, trained only in full power configurations, didn't know how to respond to partial shield failure. Their entire computer systems seemed to freeze, unable to process this unexpected situation. "Second ship, same pattern," Walker ordered. "Hayes, route more power to our rear shields. They're about to figure out they can shoot us from behind." But they didn't. The Empire ships continued following their standard combat protocols, firing full broadsides at scheduled intervals, missing the agile Earth ship completely. Their rigid training worked against them as the thunder of dawn exploited gaps in their defense patterns that had existed for centuries but had never been challenged. The colony's civilian population watched in awe through their viewport windows. Instead of the usual exchange of massive energy beams and calculated destruction, they saw something that looked more like a dance. The smaller ship spun and weaved between its larger opponents, its weapons firing in irregular bursts that seemed random but systematically took down the enemy's fighting capability without destroying the ships themselves. "Third dreadnought adapting," Mason reported with surprise. "They're trying to break formation." Walker smiled. "They're learning." "Good. Hit their engines before they figure out too much. Let's end this cleanly." The thunder of dawn executed a maneuver that made the Alliance representative gasp. It cut its engines mid-turn, letting momentum carry it past the 3rd dreadnought's firing arc, while conserving power for a concentrated weapons burst. The Empire ship's engines sputtered and went dark. In less than 15 minutes, 3 of the Empire's most powerful warships hung powerless in space. No one had died. No ships had been destroyed. The colony was safe, and the enemy had been neutralized with surgical precision. "Status report," Walker called out, though he could already see the results on his display. "All 3 dreadnoughts disabled," Mason replied. "Their life support and basic systems are functioning, but weapons and engines are offline. Colony shield holding at 60%. No civilian casualties." The Empire representative stood up, his hands shaking slightly. "This is impossible. Our tactical simulations show that a ship your size couldn't even scratch a dreadnought's shields, let alone disable 3 of them." "That's the problem with simulations," Walker replied, turning to face both representatives. "They can only account for what you program them to expect. Humans learned long ago that real combat isn't about following patterns. It's about thinking differently every time." As Alliance rescue ships approached to secure the disabled dreadnoughts, Walker could see the impact of their demonstration rippling through both fleets. Commanders on both sides were requesting sensor data of the battle, trying to understand how their most basic assumptions about warfare had been proved wrong by a single small ship. News of the Thunder of Dawn's victory spread through both fleets like wildfire. Young officers gathered in their break rooms, watching recordings of the battle over and over. They had never seen anything like it. A ship that moved unpredictably, shields that changed strength on purpose, weapons that disabled rather than destroyed. On the Alliance flagship Guardian, Admiral Turner found himself surrounded by junior officers asking unprecedented questions. "Sir," one young lieutenant asked, "why can't we vary our shield strength like they did? Our generators are capable of it." Turner didn't have a good answer. They had always run shields at maximum power because that's what the tactical computers said was optimal. But watching the Thunder of Dawn's battle had shown him how wrong those computers could be. In his quarters on the Empire command ship, Commander Stone studied the battle footage for the 100th time. He focused on how the Earth ship had targeted specific systems instead of trying to destroy the whole ship. It went against everything he had been taught about warfare, but the results were undeniable. The Thunder of Dawn had become an unwitting teaching ship. Both Alliance and Empire commanders requested permission to send their younger officers aboard to learn. Walker and his crew found themselves conducting impromptu classes on basic combat principles that humans had known for centuries. "You see," Mason explained to a group of alien officers in the ship's tactical room, "sometimes the best move isn't the most powerful one. Watch how we powered down our forward shields here to give more energy to our engines. Your computers would never suggest that because it looks risky on paper." In the engine room, Hayes showed fascinated engineers how they could modify their power distribution systems. "Your ships are actually more capable than ours," she told them. "You just never tried using them creatively because your computers weren't programmed for it." The impact spread beyond just military tactics. Alliance and Empire crews began questioning other patterns they had followed for centuries. Why did they always build their ships the same way? Why did they never try new weapon configurations? Why did every battle have to end in retreat or destruction? Walker watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and concern. "They're learning fast," he told Mason during a quiet moment on the bridge. "Maybe too fast. Change like this can be dangerous if it happens too quickly." But they didn't have time to worry about the pace of change. Reports came in of more battles breaking out along the front lines, but these were different from the usual engagements. Young commanders on both sides were trying new tactics, breaking formation, attempting maneuvers they had seen the Thunder of Dawn perform. Not all of these experiments went well. Some ships were lost as inexperienced crews tried advanced maneuvers their training hadn't prepared them for. But for the first time in centuries, both sides were learning from their failures instead of just recording them as statistics. The older generation of officers struggled with these changes. Many refused to adapt, clinging to their calculated patterns and predictable formations. But they found themselves increasingly outmaneuvered by younger crews who had embraced the human way of thinking. "Your ship has started a revolution," the Alliance representative told Walker during another meeting. "Our tactical computers are being reprogrammed. Training protocols are being rewritten. Nothing will be the same." The Empire representative nodded in agreement. "We've already received requests from dozens of commanders asking permission to modify their shield systems for variable power distribution. Some are even suggesting we design new ships specifically for adaptive combat." Walker listened to their reports with a thoughtful expression. The Thunder of Dawn had arrived here by accident, but its impact was becoming more intentional by the day. They were teaching these advanced civilizations something humans had learned through countless conflicts on Earth, that the key to effective warfare wasn't just about having the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons. It was about creativity, adaptability, and the willingness to try new approaches. As he looked out at the massive fleets surrounding his ship, Walker could see subtle changes in how they were arranged. The rigid formations were beginning to break down. Ships were starting to move with more purpose, more individuality. The era of predictable, calculated warfare was ending, and something new was taking its place. 30 days after the Thunder of Dawn's accidental arrival, the main fleets of the Alliance and Empire met again in space. But this time was different. Gone were the perfect formations and predictable attack patterns. Instead, ships moved with purpose and creativity, their crews making real-time decisions instead of following computer protocols. Walker stood on the Thunder of Dawn's bridge, watching the two fleets approach each other. Beside him, Admiral Turner and Commander Stone had come aboard to observe. This battle would be unlike any in the past 3 centuries. They're not following any standard attack patterns, Stone noted, his voice showing a mix of pride and nervousness. The younger commanders have completely rewritten their tactical approaches. The first shots fired weren't the usual full-power broadsides. Instead, smaller ships darted forward, using variable shield configurations they had learned from Hayes. Their weapons targeted specific systems, just as the Thunder of Dawn had demonstrated. "Look at that," Mason pointed to a group of Alliance cruisers. "They're using our scattered defense pattern, but they've modified it for their larger ships. They're actually improving on our tactics." The battle unfolded like a complex dance. Ships moved in fluid formations that changed constantly. When vessels were hit, their crews adapted instead of following damage control protocols. The number of ships destroyed was remarkably low, as both sides focused on disabling rather than destroying their opponents. In the midst of the engagement, something unprecedented happened. An Empire destroyer, heavily damaged but not destroyed, sent out a surrender signal. In 300 years of war, no ship had ever surrendered. They had always fought until retreat or destruction. The Alliance ships nearby responded by holding their fire and sending rescue shuttles. The Empire crew was evacuated safely, their ships secured instead of being blown apart. The whole exchange took less than 10 minutes, and then the battle continued. "That's what we were missing," Turner said quietly. "The human element. The ability to see alternatives, to make choices that aren't in any program." The battle ended not with one side retreating, but with both fleets pulling back to safe distances. Casualties were at their lowest level in centuries. Most damaged ships could be repaired rather than replaced. Both sides had demonstrated their new capabilities without needless destruction. Hours later, Walker found himself in a historic meeting aboard a neutral station between the fleets. Leaders from both the Alliance and Empire sat together, not to plan their next battle, but to discuss something that hadn't happened in 300 years, real peace talks. "The Thunder of Dawn showed us something we had forgotten," the Alliance leader began. "War isn't about following patterns until one side runs out of ships. It's about achieving objectives, and sometimes those objectives can be reached without destruction." The Empire's representative nodded. "Our young officers have proven that we can fight differently. Perhaps it's time we think differently about peace as well. After all, if we can change how we fight, we can change how we resolve our differences." Walker listened as the two sides began discussing terms. They talked about establishing joint training programs to teach adaptive tactics. They proposed creating mixed fleet exercises where both sides could practice together. Most importantly, they started examining why they were fighting in the first place. "Your ship's presence forced us to question everything," Stone told Walker during a break in the talks. "Once we started questioning our combat tactics, we couldn't help but question the war itself." The Thunder of Dawn's crew had finally figured out how to repair their jump drive, but their impact would remain long after they left. Both sides had begun dismantling their tactical computers, replacing automated responses with trained human judgment. Ship designs were being modified to allow for more flexible operations. Young officers who had embraced the new ways of thinking were being promoted to leadership positions. As Walker prepared his ship for the jump home, he looked out at the assembled fleets one last time. The rigid, mechanical formations were gone forever. In their place were ships commanded by crews who had remembered how to think, adapt, and make their own decisions. "Ready for jump, Captain," Hayes reported from her station. Walker nodded, knowing they were leaving these people forever changed. A single lost ship had shown two massive civilizations that the greatest weapon in any war wasn't technology or firepower. It was the human ability to think differently, to adapt, and to find new solutions to old problems.